just the finishing up process of your drone. Even though you may not be at this point yet, I just want to get it out there so that you kind of have the bigger picture in mind of what the end product will look like, so you can continue working towards that. This is going to be part of the end product, which is going to be a little animation of your drone. So if we watch this really quickly while it loads. See, there he is. And then it flies towards the camera. He's not actually cut off here, he just stops. Can you make it explode? I could. I just download fire and I just put it right on top of it and then disintegrate.
He's too cute.
So that's the idea with this. So I was not here Monday, obviously. I did put up a video of how to start organizing your stuff so that by the time you're ready to go to the next stage, all your stuff should be nicely base textured in here, wherever you want actual textures. So you'll see I have lights, I have a little symbol here, I have my name right there, okay, another thing, another lights. And then I have all my stuff organized over here by the major groups of how they're going to be animated, okay? So certain things like each engine. There we go. So here's this whole engine group that I have all together. So if I needed to, I could turn that off or turn that back on. I also have different things inside here like, and I should have called this wires. Wires. I have the engine guard, which is this little thing there. I have the propeller. Now this group has everything in it that would be moving. So if this is an actual drone, that's what would be spinning around. And I can test it by going into my rotate and spinning it and verifying that yes, it definitely is rotating the correct way. We also have prop guard, that's right there, okay? So all the stuff in here is kind of organized. I did not go into each one of my blades and rename them. That doesn't need to be renamed, so I just left it just like that. Okay, so you'll see how it's organized so that everything is basically separated like that. A couple extra tools just to kind of help speed some of the stuff up. Let me open up one of my previous versions, number 2, I think it was. All right, so one of the issues that we have is that when we start, I think there was one. Number 1, yes. There we go. Whenever we use this symmetry, what happens is we need to eventually break it off so that we can move the pieces individually. Especially when we start taking it to another program, we need to be able to do that. So when we hit C, it takes everything inside there and separates it, okay? So now one way to get the stuff to be symmetrical and to pull it out of this group is if we grab all of these things and go to objects, you can do this delete without children. So basically it'll delete the top nodes, but not the stuff inside it, right? So we do that and it deletes the stuff without ruining all the other stuff. So then I have, where did it go? Sometimes my thing freezes, it doesn't want to update. Come on. Oh, so I'm not in object mode. There we go. All right. So something like this. So it broke these apart, but if you look at them, when I select one, it's selecting all 4 of those pieces. Okay. So in the video, I show one way, which is just grabbing the faces and splitting it off of there. Okay. So if I do that, oh, come on. Don't kill me. If I go to faces on this and I just marquee it, like this, and then I right click and say split, you'll see how it splits these 3 off of that one. And then I could grab this one and then do the same thing. I could go to split again. And every time I do a split, it's pulling it off of that surface. Okay, so by the time I'm done, I'll end up with 4 separate pieces. I missed one. That. And that. Okay. So that one's not needed, and that one's not needed. Okay. So now I have 4 separate pieces that allow me to just basically grab that stuff. So the same thing with this cylinder. Now there is a tool that allows us to do this too. I believe it's under Mesh, Conversion, Polygon Groups to Objects. So that makes all 4 of those. So that just saves you an extra step that you could do. Instead of having to grab each face, it automatically will split it. And then I could grab this and say objects, delete without children, and now I have these 4 items that are all ready to go. Okay? So obviously if you name stuff ahead of time, that would obviously save another step, because now I have to go back and rename each one of these. So if I were to go back and rename the top one, then it would do that. So like for this one, if I went and put guards, and then I went to my mesh, and then I went to conversion and converted it, and then I went to object and I deleted without children. Now I would have guards 1 through 4. So it'll just make things a little bit easier if you do it in those kinds of steps. Okay. All right, so that's that. So let me go back to my other one. There it is. Okay. So everything's nice and organized. Here's the body. Here is my back engine, my back right engine, my back left engine, my front right, and my front left. Now I did label these wrong because I did not have the legs on or my texture, so I was actually labeling it like this. So I just messed up, but it doesn't matter as long as they're labeled something that will make sense later. Okay, so then each piece inside here is labeled, everything's cool. All right, now the other thing that you can do to kind of speed up the next step is you can assign materials to things. So if I wanted to, I could grab all of these. And I just grab that one. And I double click here, and I just grab and drop material on this. Okay, it doesn't matter what it is right now. I'm just grabbing this and assigning materials to pieces. Okay, sometimes it's easier to do things in a program you know instead of a program that you're not 100% comfortable with, which you'll see in a minute. Okay, so I'll make another material, drop it on these items. Whoops. There we go. Okay. So now I have all these. So I'm just going to save this as prop export. Okay, so I just saved it as prop export. Now most of our work is going to be done after this, after it's all organized inside of this program called KeyShot. Okay, so I'm going to show you, we have to do another step before we go back into this, but I just want to show you what it's going to do so we know what we can do and what we can't do in here. So if I go into my scene and I open up my export, okay, so I imported my model, I found my file. All of these settings I can basically just leave as they are, and I import it. So this step obviously you would have to do here unless you have KeyShot at home. You can download, I believe, like a 30-day trial of it, which is plenty for what we're going to need for the class. But there it is. So there's my drone. Okay. Now what's neat about this is that our hotkeys that we would use inside the cinema translate into here. So we don't have to learn new hotkeys for it. We just have to know how to get around the interface. There are 3 major areas that we play with: the left side of the screen, the right side of the screen, and then very minimally on the bottom of the screen. So here's what's awesome about this. Like, let's say you wanted your drone to be glass. You go over here to glass and you pick something like clear, refractive, red glass, and you just drop this on there and boom, clear refractive glass. Okay. So what's neat about this is that how quick it is. All right. So if we were inside of Cinema, we would create a material, we would set our parameters, and then we would adjust settings, and then we would render it out, right? So this is live rendering. It's interactive rendering. So every time you change something, it automatically renders it out. Yes, ma'am.
So if you made the drone transparent in Cinema, would you still have to worry about making it transparent here?
Yes. Okay. So what it does is it brings in the objects, and they're separated by materials, but they're not like importing the materials. They're all just like separate pieces. Okay. We have to then apply KeyShots textures and KeyShot shaders inside here, but it's super easy. Okay. So you're not going to spend too much time inside of Cinema doing that. You're going to spend the time in Cinema laying out your texture. So again, here's a heavy frosted glass, boom, done. Here's this one, boom, done. Okay, then you want to see it from a different angle, you just spin around. It's going to look kind of cruddy, but you spin around a little bit, and then you can see that's what it's going to look like from that angle. All right, so you get a very quick, realistic look at what this thing is going to be doing. Now for the body of this, Obviously for the body, I don't want it to look like that. So I'm going to go find in here, this is what's nice is all of these different materials. I'm going to go with a plastic, I'm going to go with a hard plastic, I'm going to go with a rough plastic. See all the different options? And then I could just drop one on here. And then over on the right, so all the stuff on the left, these are all your presets, okay? The stuff on the right is where you edit those presets, okay? So that's your starting point.
You're like, oh hey, I don't like that shade of orange. You can change it.
Correct. So I click on my material. Here's all the materials that have been added into my scene already. So I click on that orange, or double click it, and then I could change the color. So I can make this whatever color. I can go green, done. And you see again how quick it's doing that. If I need to bring my texture in, because remember I made that texture inside of Photoshop that I had on there. So I just go to my textures tab, go to here, and then I go and find my texture. There it is. And now there's my texture. Now it's not going to line up perfectly because it doesn't know how to line up. Okay, it doesn't know that I already laid out UVs for it. I have to tell it that I did that. So I'm going to come over here to where it says mapping type, and just like Cinema, we have different options that we can set. I'm going to go to UV coordinates, and it'll drop it in there. Now it puts it in the wrong spot because again, it doesn't know how to translate that information. So I just have to come down here to flip, and I flip it vertically, and then we're good to go. Okay, so once you've done loaded it, UV coordinates, flip, everything lines up perfectly. Okay, so there is my texture just dropped on top of it. Now here's where we need to do some other stuff. If I take this blue, okay, it doesn't matter which one, take this blue and I drop it onto a piece, you can see how it's assigning it not to the one piece, but to everything that has the same material assigned to it. If I drop it on here, because I assigned a material inside of Cinema, it knows those items are all the same item. So whatever you assign to this, it will automatically find the other items in there because they all have the same material. Same thing with this little piece because I assigned it inside Cinema.
Are you using Cinema right now to do this?
No, this is Keyshot. So we're going to save our stuff and then bring it into this. Okay. So if we're inside of Cinema, it makes a lot more sense just to make different materials and to drop these different materials just as placeholders at least onto these items. Now it can be tricky to see like what have I assigned materials to. So what I do is I give these like a random color, just like something weird. Just there we go, blue, right? Maybe blue. Come on, there we go. It's taking an hour to upload. Then I'll go to the next one and I'll assign a different random color.
Does Keyshot recognize the different colors that are the textures that you had in Cinema?
It does recognize some of the colors and some of the textures, but
so
what?
You can like do that, and then if you go in, it'll know which was what color.
Yes, but you don't use them in there. These are just like placeholders.
Yeah.
Yep, it'll recognize them. Okay, but I use it for a way just to kind of help separate them. So then I would grab like these little guys here, and then I would add another. You can see how slow it's going because I have Keyshot still open. I should probably go to Keyshot and hit the pause button. Okay, because what it's doing is it's constantly updating. It's constantly going through and making that render better and better and better until I tell it not to do that. So now I can drop another material on these. And then again, give it some kind of crazy color. So, and the only reason I do the crazy colors is because it looks cool. If I do everything the same color, then it's kind of boring. So, what else? All right, now here it's getting a little bit trickier because we have these items. So, oops. If I open up each one of these, I know that this, and I'm just using control clicking, and this are all of those propellers. So again, I could grab a new material, give it a color. That's a nice color. You'll notice I'm also avoiding pink. I don't want pink on these. Oops. I have to drop it onto this one. There we go. So when I drop it onto, what? Why don't you go to all of them? What a jerk. All right, I'll drop it onto each one of these. I may not just be hitting a button that I need to hit. This. I'm missing one, that one. There we go. Okay. And then finally I have my wires, which is here and there. So now I go here, I double click, I give it a color. I already have green. I drop this. There it is. I just drop it right on there. Why didn't it work before? Whatever. Okay. So now that works. Perfect. So now I have basically everything has a material on it. Okay. So I would still bring this into KeyShot. I'm not ready to do that yet. Okay. Because basically I have to re-import it back in. I have to make a new scene, re-import it back in. All right. So I want to show some other stuff that I need to do before I get in here, just so you see why we're doing it. So one of the things I want to do with this after we've assigned materials is I also want to give this a little bit of an animation. And my animation is basically like a drone taking off. And if you've ever seen a drone taking off, the propellers don't start spinning immediately and the thing starts lifting off the ground. What happens is the propellers start spinning, then it's kind of like wobbles a little bit and then starts to take off. Okay? That animation inside here is very difficult to do. Right? I can do the propellers in here and that's no big deal. All right? But the wobble is trickier to do because it doesn't have a sophisticated animation tool set. So what I'm going to do is do my animation inside of Cinema. So I'm going to go to my very toppest node. I'm going to delete the animation I already have in here, just so it makes more sense of why we're doing this. This, animation, show F-curve. There we go. So now I should have no animation on here, and I have no animation. Perfect. Okay. So I need to give myself enough time. If we're going at 30 frames a second, and we do about 5 seconds of animation, which is a good amount of time to do this, then we can do 150 frames. Okay? So that's what I did. I changed my frames to 150 by typing in the value here and then stretching this out there. I go back to the beginning. I go back to this guy, which I should probably rename drone. And then I set my first keyframe. So I clicky here, I clicky there. Then I'm going to go up a little bit. So I'm going to go to, let's say, frame 30. Because again, I need to give this time for those propellers to start spinning. So maybe I'll actually go to 40. That's a good time. And then I'm going to set another key. Okay? So I haven't moved it. So from 0 to 40, nothing happens. It just does nothing at all. Now from 40 to, let's say, 75-ish. It's not an exact science. Just kind of figure this out. I'm going to move it up a little bit, and I'm going to rotate it a little bit. Okay? You can see how precise that was. I literally just moved it up a little bit and rotated it so it looks cool. And then I'm going to set my keyframes. Now I have to do position and rotate. Now I go up a little bit more, and then I move it a little bit more, and then I rotate it again. Okay? Don't go crazy with it. You don't want to spin it in circles. You just want to give it some very subtle movements. Then I'm going to go up here a little bit. Then I'm going to move it up again. Give it a little bit of rotate. And then reset my keys. Then I'll go up to 150. And then here it's going to just take off. And maybe he'll rotate just slightly a little bit more like that. Maybe even kind of come towards the camera a little bit. There we go. Okay, so now we have this animation. So if I rewind it and hit play, there's the thing spinning, and then he goes. Cool. I don't really like the spacing here, so I'm just going to move this up a little bit. And I'll adjust that in a minute. Just, yeah. Okay. Whoop. I did that again. I moved it in the perspective view, which is a no-no, because what happens is, come on, just get out of the way. Just get out of the way. What happens is, as I move this, it's locking it to the floor. So if I were to spin around, see what it did? So I have to jump to a different view. I have to go to like my side view, or another view where I can see this, not that one. There we go. So something like this view, and now I can move this up a little bit more. Move this up a little more. Okay. You can see the dots here, and what I'm trying to do is keep the dots kind of consistently spaced. If I do this, it's going to go pretty quick, and then really slow, and then pretty quick again. That's a no good thing to do. So I just kind of space it like that. Good. I jump back to here. I rewind it, I spin around a little bit so I can see it, and then I hit play again. Propellers are whirring up, it's moving up. Cool. So now I need to edit my keyframes, right? So what's going to happen is, right when this gets to the end, it's actually going to just like, it's not really doing it here. On my other one, it was kind of slowing down a little bit. So I want to see if it's slowing down. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to go to animation, I'm going to say show me my F curve. And you can tell it definitely is slowing down here. If you look at the graph, see how this is kind of flattening out? If that flattens out, that means it's slowing down. So I don't want it to look like it's slowing down. If I had After Effects open still, you could see that my drone looks like he's slowing down because I didn't do this step. I want to click on this and then grab this handlebar and just pull it down like that. That way it looks like it's going to continue move, but we've cut the camera so we don't see it. Okay, same thing here. I'm going to grab it and do that. And I can check the other ones too to see, but I don't think they're going to be, there's nothing really critical in the other ones that is as critical as those two. That should be good. All right. So now I go. There we go. Cool. All right. So I'm going to save this again. Now, again, this is not my final one. I'm going to come back to Cinema in a second because I want to show you what this is going to do just doing it like that. So I import again. I go to my export. I import it just like that. And I'm going to open up the animation, and this is where my time slider is. So you can see it brought in the animation, and it basically like locks this animation onto a onto this item. So as I click and drag, all right, watch it right here, right there. So do you see what it's doing right before it takes off? What is it doing? It goes down, right? So why is it going down? There's a translation issue between what Cinema interprets as my curves for my animation and what KeyShot interprets as my curves for my animation. Okay? So KeyShot is basically saying you have keyframes here, here, and here. I'm going to make sure that everything stays nice and smooth, so I'm going to dip down and then come up. And that's obviously not what we want. So I'm going to go back to Cinema, and what I need to do is what's called baking. I need to lock in my keyframes. Okay, I basically need to say at frame 1 you're here, at frame 2 you're here, at frame 3 you're here. That way KeyShot has no guesswork. It's just like that's what it's going to be. So I'm going to go back to my animation curve here. So I have to go back to the F curve. I'm going to click on my drone so I can see everything, and I'm going to frame it. There we go. And I'm going to marquee all of these. Now underneath one of these functions, I have to remember where it went. I think it's under Edit. It'd be too simple if it was in the right spot. In the same spot I remembered. Nope, nope, nope. One of these shots, it'll say Bake Objects. There it is, Bake Objects. Okay, so under Functions, we go to Bake Objects. And what this is going to do is it's going to bake in, just like I said, every single frame. So I have, if you look at my keyframes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 keyframes. By the time we're done, we'll have 151 keyframes because it went from 0 to 150. So I'm going to say Bake Expressions, sure, we don't have anything. We don't need to create a copy of this. We can just leave it as is. We can clean the tracks, sure, that's fine. Position and rotate are the important ones, and then we hit OK. And so now it's gone through, and if you look at it, we have keyframes at every single one of our frames. If I close this, you can see that my line here is perfectly lit up. Now where it doesn't add keyframes, which is kind of annoying, is this area here, like the important area. That's where it didn't add keyframes. So I'm going to go back to my drone, back to here, back to my, not the F curve, I'm going to go to the track. And what the track does is it allows me to see all of the keyframes, okay? So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Same zooms as you have in the other one. I'm going to take this keyframe here, and I'm just going to Alt drag it over. Oops, sorry, Control drag it over? Yes, Control drag it over. And then I'm going to Control drag it over again, and I'm going to Control drag it over again. Now I can't like do this, it'll just pop it in the middle. It doesn't put it next to it. So I'm just Control dragging it. Now once I get a nice number in there, then I can just grab all of them, and Control drag that over, and then Control drag that over. And even if I overlap them, it doesn't matter because they're all the same keyframe anyway. So all this is doing is just copying that animation and pasting it onto every single one of those frames. So just filling in that extra data. All right, so now if I save this, and then I jump back to KeyShot, and then I say New, and then I say Import. Wonderful. Now, at some point, you might also get a warning. Like when I first imported my drone, I got a warning on my other one. I don't know why it's not happening here, but it said your drone is too big. Do you want to scale it down? And I said, of course, scale it down. Okay. So you might get that warning. So just if you do, you can just hit yes. So now if we watch the animation, he does not bounce at the beginning. He does not dip down and then fly up. And then also his animation here is exactly the same. He has a nice smooth animation just like he did before, and it works out perfectly. Okay. Now let's say that he did need to come and get scaled down or whatever. If I click in here, this is kind of like in Cinema, this little area. So if I click on my models or my pro object here, I can go to position and I can uniformly scale him. So I can make him like super tiny, or I can make him regular size, or make him super big. Okay, so he actually came in at a good size, so I'm just going to leave him there. I can also say snap to ground. If for some reason he was above the ground, I could say snap to ground, and it would lock him into the ground so that his feet are actually touching the ground plane. There's no like move tool like regular. You have to go to this move tool, and then you can move stuff around if you need to. Okay, I don't want to do that, but I can. That's all for that area. Okay, so now that we have this animation going good, what I want to do before I do any texturing is I want to make sure that his animation of the propellers will work too. I want to get all my animations set up so that it works. Because what I don't want to do is assign all my materials and then have to come back to this and redo everything because the animation doesn't work. Okay, so I'm going to go to animate one of my propellers. So opening up this. Here's all my stuff laid out perfectly. Here is my, I'd make this bigger so I can see it. Make this bigger so I can see it. There we go. Here's my front left propeller. Okay, so I'm going to animate one of these things. Now if I right click on it and go to animation, I could animate, translate, rotate, or fade if I wanted to fade it on or off or whatever. I don't want to do that obviously. So I'm going to say animate the rotation of this. And what it does is it drops in just this little bar. Okay, that bar is the animation. One of the things that is horrible about this program is the ability to move windows around. Sometimes it doesn't let you. So I have to make this bigger first, and then it'll let me. Maybe. I may have to do that, and then it'll let me pull it up. Nope. I'll just pull it off. There we go. All right. So what I'm going to do is this is the propeller. This is the drone. So I'm going to take the propeller, and I know that that animation should go until the very end. Right? It should go all the way to the end of the animation because it's not like it's going to stop moving. So I can zoom out. I can drag this over. There we go. So it's going to go the full 5 seconds. And then how many degrees do I want to rotate this? Now, there's no magic number here. If you put too much in, though, it's going to be like crazy. Like if I put in 300,000, it's just going to go zip right away and we won't be able to see anything. If I put in 3,000, that seems like an appropriate number, okay? So that is about the range that I go. Let me scoot this off screen a bit. And then I'm going to play it. So I'm just clicking and dragging so we can see it, and you can see what happens. Okay? So obviously, my animation is going in the wrong direction. So I would pick Y, right? So that way it spins this way instead of what it was just doing. So now I'll click and drag again, and then we can see that it definitely does spin and then take off. Now there's more options over here. Now there's no graph as far as I know so far. There's no graph inside a keyshot that allows me to see and tweak this animation. But what I want it to do is basically slow down at the beginning, like start off slowly and then pick up speed. So if I go to my time settings here, all you have to do is just pick. Like I want this to ease in. Okay, so it's going to basically start off slow and then pick up speed. That's what that'll do. All right, so that should take care of that, so it'll pick up speed. And so now when I hit play, and there it goes. Okay, so now what I need to do is I need to take this animation and apply it to all my other ones. So if you look over here, when I took this propeller and I added that animation, it also added this to it. Okay, so that little guy right there, that's the animation. I can click this and it goes away. The animation stops. So if I were to click and drag, you'll see that that doesn't move at all, which is kind of neat to be able to do. But I could also right click on this and copy the animation and then paste the animation onto all the other parts. So I'm just going to close the left engine, go to the right. go to my right prop, and then paste the animation. I'm going to go to the back left, go to my prop, and paste the animation. Now you may notice that there's another option inside here, which is paste linked. So linked means that it only exists in the one spot, and if I change the one spot, it'll change all of them. I don't want to do that, and I'll show you why in a second. All right, so every time I pasted it, I got one of these. Okay, 4 different animations, basically, one for each one. So now when I play this, you can see that they all spin and then they all take off. Okay, so now what's wrong with it?
Wait, do it one more time.
Go ahead.
I don't know if they're spinning at the exact same time or still variation.
They're spinning at the same
Right,
direction.
they're spinning at the same time and the same direction, right? So we can add a little bit of variation into this. So if I go over here to my animation and I click on one of these, I could say maybe one of these spins at 3,500, right? So it gives it a little bit of variation into the individual propeller. Okay, so this one I'll do the same thing. Maybe this is 3,200, and then this one is 2,800. Doesn't really matter which one you do because they're all just random. Now, each one of these should be spinning in its own way, okay? So like this one here should be spinning counterclockwise, right? Because that's how the propellers are spinning. Same thing with the opposite one. This one should be spinning clockwise. This one should be spinning clockwise. Now, nobody's going to really notice if the blades spin opposite, right? So if this one spun the wrong direction, no one's really going to say anything about it. But the fact that they're all spinning in the same direction, someone would definitely notice that. So all I need to do is grab opposite ones, oops, I guess one at a time, and then just make this 3,500 just a negative number. Okay, so that's what's nice about this program is how basically drag and drop-ish it is, where it's like, here's the animation, here's the settings, and then we're done. So now we go back, and then I rewind this and hit play. You can definitely see we have a different kind of feel for this now that each one is kind of moving on its own. Now it is going pretty slow. I can turn off some of these options here. So if I go to lighting, I could turn off self-shadow, and that'll help speed it up a little bit. I could also turn off, my motion blur is off. I think that's the only thing that's on. Ground shadows I can turn off too. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There we go. So it, a little bit faster, a little bit easier to see what's going on. Okay, so that's part of that, right? Now the other part to get this to look like it's actually spinning, because right now it's frozen, it doesn't look like it's spinning, is to turn on motion blur. So we turn this on, and now we'll have some nice motion blur on this thing, which is super sweet. And then we could also go into turn some of the other stuff back on now that we're done with the animation part, right? So let's go to our lighting and add in, here's a bunch of different settings. So like basically just like how detailed you want it. If you go to a full simulation, this is going to take more time than it does on a non-full simulation. You can see how grainy this is being for a lot longer. Eventually it'll clean up, okay? So what's happening is it does passes. So it's kind of like, if you were to sketch for 10 seconds, how much you could sketch, but then if you went for 20 seconds and 30 seconds and 40 seconds, you can come back and start adding more detail. That's what it's doing. So it updates it every time. So I typically don't work with full simulation. Typically I'm on basic or performance just to kind of set stuff up. Now if you look down here, this is where all of those options are getting turned on. So things like self-shadow, obviously we're getting shadows now inside of these areas. So you can see some of those areas. We also have under the environment, we have ground shadows. So as our object is close to the ground, it actually feels like it because we can see the shadows. We could also turn on ground reflections. Every option we add just is going to take more time to render, okay? So we just have to be aware of that as we start to play around with things. So here's global illumination. So what this is going to do is if we had a blue object, and you can see there's the color that came in from cinema, that it would kind of cast some of this blue into our scene. Not much though. We also have castics and global or ground illumination, which could also add to our scene too. You can see where the red here, if I zoom in,
Oh, I see that.
you see how the red is kind of like glowing onto the other objects here? So that's part of that global illumination where it's kind of casting into it, okay? So now that we know that the animation works, and now that we know that the settings are all set up so that this works pretty good. Now we can start to customize some of our other area. Now we're going to be doing 2 renders with this. One of them is an animation. So just like I showed at the beginning, you're going to be doing an animation like that. And then you'll also be doing a still. Okay? So your still is going to be done in a clean white area, just like this. Okay? Now if you go to the Environments tab, you can actually pick different scenarios of how you want this lit up. So what we don't want for our still is one of these things. Okay? Nothing that has an actual like picture as a background. What we want is one of these. So one of these basic ones. So if you go to like something like this, all you do is drop it in, and then it updates it. Okay? So you want to find one that's going to match what the idea with yours or the look of yours happens best. So here's another one. So that one looks pretty sweet like that. I don't like having this card here, so I could just maybe turn around. Apparently not. They're all over the place. Let's go with maybe 2 cards. There we go. Alright, so something like this maybe I could do. I could also go to my Environment tab under my settings, and I could rotate this. So if I wanted to hit it at this angle and show that, but I don't want to see the card, I could rotate this so that the card is basically out of the picture. Okay? I could also take the size of this and make it bigger, so then those cards are now being pushed out further so I again don't see them. Alright, so I like the way this is looking so far. Let me go to my scene now and my materials, and I'm going to start dropping materials on here. So for the base of this, I'm going to assign just this plastic. It's hard, oops, shiny. Shiny, there we go. The shiny plastic to this. I'm going to go to my material, and I'm just going to go to the Textures tab and load in that decal sheet that I have. Okay, and then I have to make sure I set this to UV, make sure I set this to flip, and now that's all set up nice and neat. Okay, cool. Then I'm going to go through and just assign materials to my other parts. And because I already set it up ahead of time, this part happens a lot quicker. So if I go to, let's say, my metals, all right, because the metals are kind of like the neat ones to see. I'm going to zoom in here so I can see this a little bit better. And I'm going to go to, close that, metal. Let's go to copper. And you'll see there's different materials inside here too, so you can like copper brushed looks pretty cool. So I can drop copper brushed onto these wires inside this. And I get this copper brushed look. Maybe not copper brushed, just regular copper. It's picking up some of the blue. Let me turn that off. I'm just too close to it. Yeah, I can see the copper over there. Okay. All right, so that's good. All right, so now let's go to, let's say, nickel. And so I'm going to take this nickel and drop it onto the tips of this. Now again, just because this is metal and just because it's reflective doesn't mean I can't double click even this object here to bring up the material and then change the color of it. So if I wanted this to be red, which I do, I will play with these sliders until I get it to be like a red. That's cool. Okay. Oh, and then you could also drop these colors in here. Oops. Cancel. Save. Oh, how did I do that before? No, that's it. Just drop it in. Just boop, drop it in. Okay. So now I'll go to these bars here, and those bars would be something like plastic. So I go to materials, I go to my plastic, I go to hard plastic, rough, and then it doesn't matter because a lot of these are just basic colors. They all have the same properties, just different colors. So I can drop this on here, double click it, and then change that color. I'm going to change this to HSV. I like that better. There we go. So that might be kind of a neat coloring on there. Okay, now I can also adjust properties. So if I adjust this roughness, I pull that down, it's going to be less rough and more smooth, more reflective. If I pull this up, it's going to be rougher, so that reflection is going to be spread out a bit more. Okay, so that's very similar to how cinema handles its stuff. So you want to find obviously a good match inside there. So that's good there. Cool. Let's go to the propellers themselves. So these ones I'll drop on a shiny material. I can double click it, click there, and then I can add, let's see, there's red, there's red. So I can go with something like yellow, let's say. That. And then these things here, I can make those a metal, so I can go up to metal again. These anodized ones look pretty sweet. I want the brushed one. Cool. Alright, so there is basically everything is textured. I could again go back and play with any of these, tweak any of these, modify any of the textures or properties that I need to. I could also go into my environment and I could change the brightness down so it's not as bright, or I can make it even brighter. I could change the background too. So right now my background is this environment. I can go to the background and just say I want this just to be a flat color. So if I just made it white, you can see how I don't even see those things anymore. Or I can just make it black, whichever one is going to look better. That looks kind of horrible. So something in the middle here. There we go. Okay, so that way I can zoom out or zoom in, and you see I don't see the two cards right there, which is obviously important. All right, so that's cool. There's also a ground here, and I can make the ground bigger or smaller. The smaller it is, the sharper your shadows will be. And then the bigger it is, obviously the bigger your shadows will be, or the softer your shadows will be. So you want to find, again, kind of like that sweet spot. All right, so that looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a good angle for this, okay? And we're going to take a picture of this. We're going to save it out a regular picture. So I need to go to my resolutions. Now here's another ridiculous thing about this program is if I go to my image here, this is what the image is going to look like. There's also a camera, so you can adjust things just like you would in cinema for what the lens is doing. So if I set this to 15, I get a much more kind of fisheye lens than if it's at like 50. Okay, this is a bit flatter. So it all depends on what you want to do. There's also a grid you can add in. Also lens effects, depth of field. Okay, we'll be adding this in there too for the still. And I think I want to get the still kind of like up here. And I turn off motion blur. I did. Oh, that's right. No? Lighting. Why did my motion blur go away? There it is. I had to switch this back from lighting to basic. That's why it wasn't on. I'm going to pull it down. It's moving too much, and we're getting like way too much motion blur on this guy to even see what he's doing. So even when he's like on the ground, that might be a good spot to get some of that. So now I can go back to my camera, back to depth of field. Okay. And what a depth of field does is just like your camera, it's like what's in focus and what's out of focus. So right now my focus point is at 6,000 units. So I'm going to click on select point of focus, and I'm going to click on right there. So that sets that point as my point of focus. Then as I take my f-stop down, what this should do is blur out more of the stuff that's closer to me. So if you look here, this part is completely in focus, and then this part is a bit fuzzy, and then even back there we're a bit fuzzier too. And as I play with this f-stop, like I can go really low, 0.05, it'll really kind of fuzz out everything but that center area. Okay, whatever is this far from the camera is completely in focus, then everything else gets blurry. Again, it's kind of fuzzy, extra fuzzy here because we're at such a low resolution or such a low quality, but the quality of this will be awesome once we're done. So I set it to a really low value like 0.05. Now I can go to my image. Okay, so this is the part that I was telling you is kind of stupid. So we're going to go with a landscape picture. Our drone is basically more wide than it is tall, so it makes more sense to go with something that is more landscape than portrait. Okay, so I'm going to go with something landscape in here, And what I want to do is, they don't even have the one in here that I want, but let's just pretend that it is 2560 by 1600. That's pretty close. Okay. So what it does is I clicked on that and you can see that it did not change my settings. Okay. It's at 535 by 334. So it tries to fit that image to my screen. My screen is not that big, so it doesn't show it. So basically it gives you these like weird settings. Now if I do this and pull it off of being maximized, and then I go to it, now it'll actually work. It's weird, but it does. Then what I can do, I have to pull this over so you can see it. It doesn't do it fully, but it does it pretty close. So I can lock this in here, and then I can shrink this down. Okay? So basically my proportions are now in effect still. It's just the sizing of it doesn't match perfectly. So right about there is good. So now what I'm going to do is just kind of line up my camera. So I'm going to basically frame it. Whatever's inside this frame, that's what's going to render. So I want to make sure that I have enough room in here to see a good shot of my item. As I zoom out with the camera, what's happening is my depth of field is still on, so it's trying to figure out 2,000 units from the camera, this is going to be in focus. Well, that's too far away now. So I go back to my camera, back to select, click on the little dot, and then again we'll see that we have our depth of field clicked on again. Okay, so we still have the focus out of there. And now we're at about 5,000 units from it. I'll take my f-stop down even further to again kind of emphasize what is inside here. That might be too low. I don't see anything now. Alright, so that should be pretty good. Okay, so now I actually need to render this out. So I'm going to go to my render and I'm going to say render. And for my still image, you see there's still, there's animation, and then there's this VR thing we don't use. So I'm going to go to my still image and I'm going to give this a name. So I'm going to call it Sarcona Drone Still. I'm going to put it into my folder. So this will go into my P drive, my Sarcona folder, 2510, work, drone, rendering. Yep, that's good. I'm going to save this as an EXR. An EXR gives you the best quality settings because it has the most bit depth of all of them. I'm also going to click on all render passes. Actually, we don't need that. Never mind. We don't need the render passes for this. That's fine there. Okay, so now we go back to our preset, and we're going to set this to 2560 by 1601. Cool. We don't need transparency in this one. Print size is 8 by 5 at 300, so that gives you an idea of how big you could actually go with this.
But if you got transparency, would you be clicking on it or no?
Yes, if I had not transparency in the object, but transparency in the scene. So that way it would actually like get rid of the background if we needed to. So now I can go to my options, and I have to use maximum samples here, and I have to crank this up to something like 256. It's a lot. Now I'm going to hit render. And so what it's going to do is it's going to render out my image at full quality. So now it's actually saving it at this full size. And you can see how slow this is going to go because of all the stuff that we have going on in this. We have depth of field happening in here. We have our motion blur. We have all of this light, and it's trying to refine and refine and refine this. And so it's going to take some time for this image to actually render out. So I'm going to just kind of set that off to the side. Can I? Nope. I'm going to cancel that for now, just so we can go to the next part. Just stop it. Okay, so now the next part of this, that's one of the items you're going to do. So there's your still. So you may want to save this as, in case you need to come back to it, save as. Yes, it's fine. Make sure it goes into your folder. That's not the right folder. P. Drone still. There we go. Cool. All right. So then the next part of this is going to be the animation part. And for this, we don't need depth of field. And then for this, we want to go to the environments and pick something that is an actual image. Okay, so you can use an indoor, an outdoor, or in some of these studio ones, they actually have some neat ones. Maybe they don't in the studio. Yeah, something like that you could do maybe. No. Yeah, let's stick to the studio, the interior exterior. Okay. So any one of these you could drop in and then just try it out and see. So you just drop it in. And then I have to go back to my environment and choose lighting environment. And what you're going to see is it's going to look like our drone is actually like in the room. Okay. Ground shadows we need. There we go. And I should have had those on before when I rendered my still, so it's a good thing I didn't render my still out fully. I can adjust my setting just like before, so I can make the size bigger or smaller. There we go. I don't really like this one. Let's go to an outside one. There we go. Now the lighting that's in the scene, there's no actual lights in it. All the lighting is actually coming from that image, okay? So where the sun is back here, that's where it's lighting up. So you can see how it's kind of blasting in there, and it actually looks like this drone is on the ground. If I go to rotate this, like that's where the sun was, like this, the light's going to come from here, and then you can see how this part is actually like blown out because the sun is too bright, and our shadow is back there. So that's where finding like a good angle, like that seems like it's a pretty decent angle.
That's like what you were showing us for the cereal box.
Mm-hmm.
And the open.
With that environment, right. But this one's doing all the lighting for us, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So we could adjust our contrast too. Maybe take the contrast down some. There we go. We could also zoom in. Now because this is animated, you have to make sure that you're not going to pop out of frame. So I need to go back to my image. I'm going to unlock this. And I'm going to choose a different preset. Now our preset is not going to be in this list, so we actually have to type it in. So we're going to be rendering this at, I need to pull this out, 960 by 540. So once that's typed in, then you can lock it, then you can resize your window. Again, it's stupid, but it is what it is. Now I know where my frame is. Now I know where my rendering is going to take place, so that as I start to animate this, I can see, whoops, he went out of frame. So that doesn't help us at all. So let's zoom out a bit. Uh-oh. Okay, and actually he wants to be going this way. Okay, so I'm not worried about the lighting at the moment. I'm just worried about positioning him. So he goes here, and come on.
Now, are there more of these kind of backgrounds you can download?
Yes, there are. There's a whole Keyshot community where you can download these kinds of backgrounds. There are also a website called SIBL, which is somewhere right here. HDR Labs, SIBL. This thing where they provide all of these HDRs. Okay, that's what's driving this is an HDR environment. Basically, they've taken a 360 by 360 panoramic picture of a room, but they've done it in a way that captures all the lighting. So they take it every single picture like a 360 all the way around, but then they darken their lens and then they take another one. Then they brighten their lens and they take another one. So all the lighting information is actually baked right into this. So you can see here's Alex's apartment. Here is Brooklyn Bridge. Here is this one. Here's a circus. Okay. So they have lots of these different ones that are available. There's even, this is a tool that I downloaded and started playing with. This is HDR Light Studio. We may be able to get licenses for the classroom for next semester. It's not going to happen anytime soon, but they have like free licenses for schools. So in this, you're actually building your own light maps right inside it. You're like dropping in lights and stuff. So it's pretty sweet. And here's a bunch of different examples of this. Now the way that all of this stuff, like if you watch a movie and the stuff looks like crazy photorealistic, it's because they're using HDRs to help light their stuff. Because you don't get lights like this, you don't get like just drop-in lights that look perfect without having all this other information in there. Like even in this room, there's light information, sure, from that door, from this screen, from that projector, from that little light over there, from the exit sign, from all of your screens bouncing around. That's what the HDR captures. That's what helps make it look like the item is really there. So all of these things are done via that. There's also another one. Some guy had, lighting setup. Some guy had this plugin that he wrote that's basically like it creates, instead of having an HDR that lights it as an image, he actually built an HDR Studio inside of Cinema. There it is. So you could just click on, like, I want to have 4 lights on the side. Boom. I want to have a window here. Boom. I want to have this. And you would just add, you could just click on buttons to add all this stuff. All right, well, we'll get back to that. All right, so I'm here, and this looks like this is a good angle, right? So it looks like he goes right in the frame the entire time. So now I just need to take my environment and rotate it so that I have good lighting, okay? We don't want to do the flat color here because then we kind of lose the effect that it's actually there. We want this. Again, we test it, make sure everything looks good, cool. So now we come back to our render, add to render, and then instead of the still image, we're going to animation, okay? So for this preset, we type in 960 by 540, and you see how it popped it right in there. We want the entire duration, which is 150 frames. We don't want video output, we want frame output, okay? I wonder, just for fun. No, it doesn't give us some more options. Okay, so we want frame output, and then we will take this and say drone. Oops, make sure we put our name in here. Sarcona drone. And then we want this to be an EXR also. It's going to go into our frames folder, not there. It's going to go into my rendering folder. We don't need any passes for this one, and then we hit render, okay? And then it's going to go through, and just like before, it's going to render out every single one of our frames. Now I could actually probably down lower. Let me just stop that. I probably could go to the options and lower this back to like 64. Yes. And what that would do is it would just have less grain in it. Now because, or whatever, quicker renders. Because we're further away, we're not zoomed up right on it, we don't have the depth of field, we can get away with having a lower quality setting because we're further away and we don't really, we're going to have grain in here regardless. If we blow up this image and we zoom in, we're going to see little dots there because it's a small image. So now once this is done, you'll go into After Effects and you'll make this movie. So when you turn this one in, you're going to have 2 things. You're going to have a still, which is that huge image, right? And then you're going to have a QuickTime video of your drone flying around. And then if you want to add sound effects, that's one way that people in the past have added more to theirs besides just like being just this animation, but actually adding some sound effects to it. Let's just stop this. All right, so in After Effects, you're going to do the same thing we've done before on previous assignments, just double clicking here, finding your EXR, so I believe it's that one. And then dropping this onto your new comp. Here's the one that I just showed. And then going to your export, add to render queue, and all that. Now, just so you're aware too, KeyShot is not, like I said before, a sophisticated animation tool. So things like someone last semester decided they wanted their propellers to be sideways and then like tilt, it can't do that. Okay? It's not capable of doing that very easily. There's a lot of setup that we had to go through and playing around to get it to do that. I don't know why this is locking up. There we go. Let's try that again. Lossless, QuickTime, format, H264. Okay, and then here, and then I drop this into just drop it right there for now. Sarcona drone. And then render this out, and there we go. Okay, so when you turn it in, just like before, you're going to turn in your whole project folder. I don't need all of your renderings, so you can copy it to an area where you don't care if you delete stuff. Work, drone, rendering. So this is what you're going to have when you're done rendering. You'll have all these files. I don't need all those files. So you can delete all of those files except for your movie, your cinema file, and then your KeyShot file. Okay, and then any textures obviously you've created. Okay, and then your stills and animation. Okay, So that'll finish up this assignment. Now, did that finish loading? It did. Maybe it did. Yeah, there it goes. We have right now basically like a month-ish left. So like everything's going to be due for this class on the 10th. Obviously, we're not here on the 10th, but make sure it's in by the 10th. So for this assignment, we still have one more assignment we're going to be doing. So I'm going to have this one due on the 18th, but we're starting the next assignment on the 7th. Okay? Sorry, not the 18th. You can turn this one on the 19th. I don't care. But the 7th, I'm starting something new. Yes. Sorry, 14th, I'm starting something new, not the 7th. The 14th, I'm going to start the next assignment. Say